everyone. Let's get underway. Welcome to the Marin Energy Authority Board meeting for Thursday, March 1st. Item 1, board announcements. It doesn't look like we have any this evening. Let's move to public open time. Gene Dyer.
I thought if I could make a minor suggestion relative to procedural improvement. Your staff has been doing a good job reporting your monthly expenses. However, it is noted that your report only includes a single line for reporting the cost of energy. While use of a single line was appropriate when your only supplier was Shell Sena, now that you have several supplier sources and related several payments in the multi-million-dollar category, it would seem appropriate that the single line reporting line be expanded to show payments that are made to the separate contracts and suppliers. While my note to you included a number of sources that are not yet applicable, it is intended only to be a suggestion as to the types of information that will be important and should be added when they become applicable. I would recommend that you ask your staff to develop such a similar kind of reporting format. Thank you.
Thank you, Gene. Anyone else?
Thank you. I just want to mark the anniversary of Fukushima, which is coming up just in a week during this coming month. And that is something that I've been very involved in with the CPUC work that I do. I have a proposal in to figure out a planning process for replacing nuclear power with a lot more clean energy. This last couple of times they had a shutdown, they just used coal, and we had a whole lot more greenhouse gas emissions. And of course, one of the ways that I know it's possible to replace dirty resources with clean energy is because of you guys. So we can celebrate that. And I don't know if you realize, but the San Onofre power plant has been shut down for an entire month. And I just want to read you what Edison said when I said you ought to figure out a planning process to close these. They said the actions to mitigate the impact of an immediate shutdown of songs 2 and 3 would be complex, controversial, environmentally sensitive, and time-consuming. They said it would take 7 to 10 years to figure out how to replace those resources. In any event, those actions necessary to mitigate the loss of songs 2 and 3 could not be implemented quickly enough to offset the immediate adverse impacts of shutting down the units. And of course, they are shut down right now, and we don't even know when they're going to open up again. So I'm going to be asking for your support for this effort to convene a planning process at the CPUC to figure out how to put clean energy into place instead of the nuclear power.
Thank you, Barbara. Okay, let's move to item 3, report from Executive Officer Dodd.
Great. I just have a couple of items this evening. First, I wanted to welcome our newest staff member who's here with us this evening. Celine Holder has joined us as a data analyst. Can you wave, Celine? We're really grateful to have Celine. She's has been and will continue to be assisting us with tracking information on our resources and volumes, doing some compliance reporting, also doing a little bit of customer information tracking to supplement what we're getting through Noble, and then also doing a little bit of financial tracking. So we're really grateful to have Celine join our team, and she's going to be here with us for just a little bit tonight to get to know all of you. The next item is I wanted to report the good news that our open season process, our very first biannual open season process, closed today. The deadline for submitting proposals was 5 p.m. today, and Kirby's going to report the results so far. We don't have a complete tally yet of everything because we were preparing for the meeting tonight, but we have some pretty good results so far.
Yeah, I think just like previous procurement exercises that we've engaged in, this is kind of, at least at first glance, equally if not more successful. And without going into a great amount of detail here, I can tell you that we received proposals from as of about 4:55, so maybe we may have missed a couple here, but we'll get back to you with those. But as of near the deadline, we had received responses from 12 unique respondents, over 30 unique project locations, 4 different fuel sources were proposed across those different projects, including photovoltaic solar, wind, biomass, and landfill gas, which is nice. So we have a good diversity of supply there, peak, intermittent, and then baseload resources as well. And what I think is probably the most exciting pieces of information, or the most exciting pieces of information, if you recall, we asked for proposals up to 20 megawatts for individual projects, and kind of the tally is still running, but we've received responses amassing more than 400 megawatts, which is quite a ratio there. And then also, we had a cap of 45,000 megawatt hours annually that we would take for many of these unique projects. And based on the responses, we have proposals in excess of 1 million megawatt hours annually, which basically is the entirety of this agency's energy requirements at full rollout. So very exciting stuff. We're really looking forward to evaluating the responses and getting back to you with additional information related there too.
Yeah, that's great news, Kirby. I should note for the group, I actually was down at a statewide solar conference earlier this week in San Diego and actually presented for MEA on a panel. Talked up the open season and also certainly perceived a ton of interest in connecting with us potentially. So I'm not surprised to hear about the results.
Yeah, this is really great. So hopefully we'll have some good responses to evaluate.
Yeah, great. And then the next item, which Kirby's also going to jump in on, is MEA submitted our semi-annual RPS report, Renewable Portfolio Standard Report, to the CPUC earlier this week, ahead of schedule. It's due on March 1st of every year. And we will be providing a comparative analysis next month, as we typically do, looking at other entities and their submittals that we're all due today. But Kirby's just going to summarize the results from our report.
Yeah, not surprising. Marin basically put out a report that indicated nearly 28% of our energy supply was delivered from qualifying renewable resources in 2011. So this is kind of a look backwards as well as a look forwards. And that exceeds the state's current 20% mandate by nearly 39%. And it also meets the state's forward requirement for 2017 already. So we're a bit in advance of the state mandate. And if you recall, the Renewable Portfolio Standard, as it's been updated relatively recently, advances that requirement to 33% by 2020. And I think it's safe to say we're making good progress in that regard, hitting our goals well in advance of the statutory mandates. So it'll be exciting to review the reports of the other entities out there, as we've done in the past, and get back to you with that comparative analysis that Don referenced. So,
what's your timing on evaluation of the open season applicants?
We'll begin that process immediately, and I believe the schedule that we've laid out targets shortlisting these respondents in about 60 days' time, and then in trying to advance contract negotiations shortly thereafter, with the goal of having contracts potentially before your board as early as July.
Great. Don, anything else?
The very last thing I wanted to touch on is just a note that relates to our agenda this evening. We are in the process of getting our budget through the final approval process for the coming fiscal year. And as part of the wrap-up of our current fiscal year, you'll notice that there are quite a few contracts or agreements on the consent calendar this evening. These are agreements that we have with vendors that are providing services to MEA on an ongoing basis. And we try to have those wrap up at the end of the fiscal year and then start a new contract when necessary for the coming fiscal year. So I just wanted to explain what that is, and we'll get into more of the budget discussion later in the agenda.
Great. Any questions or comments for Don on the report? Okay. Item 4, consent calendar. Everyone have a chance to review it. Tom?
Just a general question for Dawn, in regard to all of these agreements with these various companies. It seems to me, and just going through very superficially, at least 3 of these, Noble, Sam Long, and Descom, all seem to have something to do with customer relations, communication, which obviously is a very important part, but it seems perhaps a bit top-heavy to have 3 different groups doing this. Do they do different things, or?
Yeah, each of these vendors provide very different and unique services, and I'll explain briefly what they are. So Noble Energy Solutions provides data management services to us, and they manage our customer call center. So that the 800 number that we have that's open from 9 to 5 every day is managed by Noble on our behalf. They also provide the data management services that include getting charges placed onto the bill for each customer. They take the meter read usage that PG&E submits for every customer and make sure that the correct charges get applied to the bill, and then reconcile on a monthly basis to make sure that revenue is coming in that matches up with what was charged, and they provide reports to us on a regular basis. So what the function that they're providing is quite technical in nature as far as the data management side, and on the customer side, it's really operating a call center for us. So that's a pretty unique set of services there.
Can I just interrupt you? In that regard, if a customer calls MEA, prospective or an existing customer, are they routed through Noble? They don't talk to one of our staff, is that correct?
Yeah, the initial point of contact is through Noble Energy Solutions, and if necessary, the calls do sometimes get escalated to our office and to Jamie in many cases, if needed. Also, since you asked, it's worth mentioning that there's a call center, a remote call center that's also being brought on board to assist with our very increased volume that's going to be coming online soon. We're anticipating a much greater volume of calls as we enroll the new customer base. So we have a remote call center in Santa Rosa that's contracting with Noble Energy Solutions to take calls, and the initial point of contact for all incoming calls will be that Santa Rosa call center. If there are questions being asked that need to be escalated, they would then go to a Noble point of contact, and then if needed, they would go to our office.
Okay.
And then to move on, the agreement with Sam Long is also a unique service. They are putting in place a customer management system, a customer database for us that will help us monitor customers, track our interface with customers. Right now we're just using an Excel spreadsheet to kind of keep track when customers call us and have questions. We enter what happened in the discussion, what the next steps were, and we'd like to get a more advanced industry accepted type of system in place that provides us access to data that's more easier to manipulate, more easy to access and view. So they're working with us to get that system in place, and once that system is up and running, there won't be an ongoing need for their services necessarily, but this is more a one-time effort to get this in place before we bring on the new customer load. And then the final agreement that you referenced, the Descom Studios agreement, is really for marketing and design work to run a deep green campaign, to really work on getting an increased enrollment in the deep green program. And we'll be talking about this under item 6, the deep green campaign. You'll see some of the flyers that have been developed, some of the email blasts that are going out, and some of the literature that we're passing out at community events. But it's really a campaign design-focused contract that we have here proposed for Descom Studios that's different than the other 2.
One last question. In regards to Noble, I guess that's our primary source of interaction with customers. Do we have any sort of assessments periodically to find out if the customers are satisfied with the calls and the responses they get and information?
Yeah, we have quite a bit of interaction with Noble, and I'll say a couple things, but then I'd like to invite Jamie to comment in as well. We receive weekly call center reports and statistics that show us how long the wait times are looking, how many calls came in on every given day, and how long it took for them to be answered, how long each call was. So we receive a lot of statistics on that. And we also receive a lot of qualitative information. So every day we receive opt-out report and deep green opt-up reports that show if a customer opted out, what the reason was, if a customer opted up, if they had any comments about why they wanted to opt up to deep green. And then we receive kind of a monthly summary. We just actually got our monthly summary today that shows all of the customer status on everyone and any interaction that happened over the last month. So we have access to a lot of information that we can use as needed. Want to add any more to that?
I mean, I think you pretty much covered. I think you pretty much covered it. The only other thing that I would add, just to exemplify the good work that they're doing, is in those reports that they send to us daily about customers who sign up for Deep Green or who opt out. They include everyone who calls in, even if it's just a request and it doesn't go forward. So, for example, the opt-out report that we get on a daily basis, they often, say that there's a customer who, wanted to know more information about opting out and was considering opting out, but then after speaking with our call center and having any misinformation or questions that they had answered, they changed their mind and decided to stay with us. So things like that, I think, are another good indicator of the level of service that they're able to provide on the phone.
And that happens about 20% of the time.
Thank you.
Just on the Noble contract, excuse me, there was a charge that was supposed to be eliminated, which is still included in the addendum, this 45-cent per megawatt hour charge.
Mm-hmm.
So in the staff report, it indicates that that is going to be eliminated, and then in the addendum contract, it's continued. So what's the story there?
Yeah, I'm happy to explain that. So this addendum is making a change that relates to the fact that we had 4 new communities join MEA in the fall. When we initially executed this agreement with Noble in 2010, in spring of 2010, it was based on a price that would account for what we anticipated would be a rollout, a full rollout of 71,000 customers, 71,000 accounts. And now that we're adding new load, once we go to full rollout now, we expect to be at 96,000 customers. We negotiated with them to see if we could have a better price or a discounted price for that incremental load. And they were willing to eliminate what is referred to as the volumetric charge or the kilowatt hour charge. Instead, we would only be paying a per customer charge on those incremental customers beyond 71,000. And so what you'll see in the chart on the 3rd page of the contract is 2 tiers. So the first tier is the first subset of customers that we agreed with them to have served back in May of 2010. So you'll see up to 71,000, there is the usage charge being applied there.
Okay.
But for tier 2, for the incremental load beyond that, there is a not applicable showing up there under
Got
the
you.
volumetric charge.
Okay, thanks.
Chris. I have a couple of questions too regarding the meters. It's a per charge. I guess there's a difference between a customer and a meter. In my jurisdiction, there's some 800 households, yet what we found with smart meters, there were something like 1,200 meters. Obviously, they're primary meters that a customer may have, and then very secondary meters that hardly have any usage. Are we anticipating, are we being charged the full amount for those secondary meters that, at least in my jurisdiction, might be as high as 20% of all the meters?
Yeah, it is a per meter charge. We use the term customer, but you're right, sometimes a customer will have more than 1 meter.
Okay. And then it refers to the cancellation fee of $125,000. Is that an automatic cancellation fee, or is that without, if that is contrary to giving a certain amount of notice?
Yeah, and I think this question could benefit from a little bit of history there. It's when we executed this agreement with Noble, it was at a time that we were very young, didn't have any track record or credit history, and actually didn't even have financing lined up. And so Noble was unable to get any type of credit support, letter of credit guarantee or anything like that to back up this contract. And they knew that they were going to have to do some upfront work to get this contract in place. They had also been working with the Kings River Conservation District as they were starting to trying to get a CCA program up and running, and they had to put their CCA program on suspense. And so that some of the work that Noble did at the front end, wasn't able to be used. And so in order to get comfortable with having an agreement with us, they put a cancellation fee into the agreement. That would be the fee, assuming that we decided not to go forward and use their services. So it is an automatic fee that is triggered. It's quite unlikely that that fee would be triggered because we don't anticipate wanting to stop using their services. They're a pretty integral part of our business at this point. But that explains what the fee is about.
But if in some time we terminate services, it wouldn't be applicable?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, John.
So it sort of brings up the question, and first I'm going to say I was surprised to see my name still on the letterhead here, so thank you. Usually if I don't come for a meeting or two, they take it off.
You better watch out.
Stop coming in all day. I'll get the message eventually. But with a lot of these contracts, as some of them being renewed for the third time, so at some point, we have to the entity has to decide, if these can be more perpetual like contracts, and certainly some things should remain that way, because the cost of setting up your own call center is not necessarily something you want to do. But also, so there's some analysis that needs to be done at some point with some of these things, whether they're in-house or outsourced, as well as taking things back out to bid at some point. Otherwise, you're not quite sure where they are compared to market, whether you're a private or a public entity. It's always good to do that, as long as everybody has a fair shot at a new contract, which is also somewhat debatable sometimes.
Yeah.
So I think it's maybe not for this round, but once as these are more integrated into what the agency does on an ongoing basis, we have those two paths. Otherwise, the hard to keep people at arm's length if they don't have that pressure.
Yeah. That's a great point. And if I might comment, we're actually looking at, there are a couple of vendors that we do tend to use frequently that you don't see here, and including Milbank and Nixon Peabody, for example. That's because we don't have an immediate need for their services, and also on the legislative front, we're not renewing that contract, so we're going to kind of wait and see when we need their services. The ones that you see here are all vendors that we will be needing in the next couple of months, and we anticipate needing at certain points throughout the year. But there is an area that we're looking at doing some analysis and looking for some other possible vendors to come forward and help us, and that's in the marketing sector. So we may be looking at in the fall at looking at other marketing firms that are out there to see if we want to bring in some additional support there. And there may be some other areas where we make changes going forward. But there are other vendors that aren't represented here.
Further questions or comments? Good discussion on that item. So do I have a motion on the consent calendar?
One more question on the consent calendar. On the notes, on agenda item 8, you don't list who is appointed to what committee.
Yeah, I can comment on that if I may. We had an attachment that was included in the board packet with that item that listed out who was on which committee. And so that, I believe that was stated in the minutes, that the staff recommendation that was included with the item was approved as it was proposed. Okay. And that's why the names aren't listed. But you're making a good point, because the prior meeting we did actually list out the names, and that's because there wasn't any written material going along with that board item.
Motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That matter carries. Item 5, resolution of the Board of Directors of MEA approving MEA policy number 004, communications in compliance with SB 790.
Justin Kudo is going to introduce this item.
Good evening. Policy 004, communications in compliance with SB 790 is something that has to do with Senate Bill 790, known as the Charles McGlashan Community Choice Aggregation Act, which was signed by the governor into law in October of 2011. The bill primarily establishes rules of conduct for electrical corporations related to how they interact with community choice aggregation programs, as well as political action. Another thing that the bill also requires is that, quote, the governing body of a community choice aggregator shall adopt a policy that expressly prohibits the dissemination by the community choice aggregator of any statement relating to the community choice aggregator's rates or terms and conditions of service that is untrue or misleading and that is known, or that by the exercise of reasonable care should be known to be true or misleading. That's great. This is a standard that staff has always taken very seriously in our business practices to date, and in accordance with the requirements set forth in SB 790 and the changes to the Public Utilities Code that go along with it, staff recommends that the board approve policy 004, communications in compliance with SB 790.
So just to be clear, SB 790 itself mandates that the agency adopt a policy reflecting this language.
That is correct. We've had a unspoken policy within the office about that, but the law requires that we codify that as a formal policy.
Okay. Any comments or questions?
I move we promise not to lie.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thankful. That matter carries. Thanks, Justin. Item 6, communications update. Jamie?
Great, thanks so much. Well, today I decided that I'm going to provide the information that's included in the staff report, mostly on this PowerPoint here. So I'm just going to jump right in because we have kind of a lot to cover today. So the first slide is in reference to the community events that we've been participating in and around Marin County. They're always really good for us to be present at because it's an excellent opportunity to speak with people in Marin face-to-face about our company and what we do, answer questions, encouraging deep green enrollments, and just general favorability with our program. So some of the events that we go to consistently are the farmers markets in Marin. There are 2 that are year-round that we're currently participating in, and those are the farmers markets at the San Rafael Civic Center and the one in Mill Valley. And we're looking forward to the spring when a few more markets that I think will be even a little bit more busy will be running so that we can participate in those as well. Attached to your staff report and also on the slide is a list of the community meetings and events that we've attended thus far this year, as well as some other events coming up. So it's a pretty comprehensive list of where we've been and where we're going around the county. And I'd invite you all to take a look at that list and please let me know if there are any events in your communities that you know of or think would be valuable for us to participate in, because I think now is the time to do it, especially with our July enrollment coming up and noticing coming soon. Yes, Kate?
Yeah, I have a question about the homeowners association meetings. Have they reached out to invite us to attend? You call them and solicit attendance, or how does that happen?
Actually, some of the homeowners associations that are listed here are have actually been set up through contacts that we've already made, just through previous relationships with responding to questions about Marin Clean Energy. I think that they initially reached out to us, and I've had reminders set on my calendar to reach back out to them when we got closer to our next enrollment. So that's how we've been doing it to date. One of the things that we're doing right now, well, that we've created is a list of community organizations that we want to reach out to start out with, to ask them if we can be included on their community newsletters. So we have a really comprehensive list. I'm sure there's some we're missing, but I'm planning on bringing that to the executive committee for further input. And in addition to those community organizations, we'll also be asking the cities to include us on their newsletters as well, if they'd like to, and on their website, so not only the newsletters.
Super, thank you.
I have a couple of requests. We have a farmer's market in Corte Madera Town Center. It's not year-round, but it's many months of the year, and it would be nice to have a presence there. Maybe you could trade off with Fairfax or something like that for part of the time.
Definitely, I think
and
that'd be
the Corte Madera Chamber also puts out a newsletter every month, and it would be great to get an article in there.
Excellent, thank you.
You can tell them I sent you.
Okay, will do. Okay, yes.
Well, I don't want to be outdone by my sister city, but Larkspur also has a farmer's market on Saturday, the Marin Country Mart, and all the artisanal shops and things like that. Marin Clean Energy is a perfect fit for kinds of folks that regularly frequent there.
There are some farmers markets that I didn't include on this list that I know are actually happening. The reason I didn't include them here is because I haven't gotten confirmation from them that we're allowed to participate. Some of the farmers markets have different types of rules about what kinds of people can be at their events. But I will definitely reach out to them.
I have an in with the shopping center owner, so ask me, I'll get you in.
Okay. Thanks. Yes.
Is it possible to include the Sunday farmers market in the Civic Center? That's such a biggie.
It could be possible. I think the reason that we haven't been going to that one recently is because, you know, we are doing a farmers market in Santa Fe already, and I think the only difficulty with that is that it's a regular weekend event, so staffing for that event might not be as it might not be as easy as it is to staff the events that are on the weekdays. But I think it's something that we could do at least once a month, you know, to meet with other groups. So. All right, any other questions about the community events? Okay, let's move on to the next slide. All right, the next slide is about our ever exciting next phase of customer enrollment scheduled for July. So we are calling this next phase of customer enrollment phase 2B, and we'll be enrolling, we think, about 82,000, adding about 82,000 customers to our current base. And all of those customers will be enrolled in the month of July. So the actual date of the enrollment will vary depending on your meter read date. So the actual switch from PG&E electric service to Marin Clean Energy will be on your regularly scheduled meter read date. So it's really an entire month of enrollments that spreads throughout. Does that make sense? Yes, okay. So when we enroll these customers, they will be enrolled into light green, 50% renewable energy, because that is our default product. And in preparation for this enrollment, we're going to start sending out opt-out notices to customers in the mail so that they know about the upcoming transition and have the opportunity to opt out if they'd rather not participate. So as we've discussed previously, we're going to be sending out 5 opt-out notices this time. And the first 3 notices are going to be letters, and they will be sent out before the enrollment. So they'll be sent out before July, in early April, mid-April, and mid-May. And then after the customers are enrolled, we will be sending out 2 more notices, which will be postcards, and those will be in late July and late August. And attached to your staff report was a draft of the first letter to go out. And actually, I believe at each of your seats today, we placed another version of that has been slightly revised. The way you'll know it's different is it has this little green box on the corner.
Actually, I've replaced all of them with the brand new ones. So you've got the most current version.
Great. So the change from what was included in your supplemental And what you see here tonight is basically that we put in a little box on the lower right-hand corner that has a Spanish and Vietnamese message about the information that's included in the opt-out and where to find more information about that. Information in Spanish and Vietnamese will be available on our website and our phone number. So if you have any suggestions to the opt-out notice, I would be happy to take them. I still have about another week before they need to be final and going off to our printers. So if you have any feedback, I can take it. Yes.
A comment on the terms and conditions that we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
We keep hearing that people wonder how it is that this agency can do this, and we force people into this, and then they have an opportunity to leave. So I'm thinking under enrollment, in the middle of that paragraph, there's a reference to the California State Assembly Bill 117 being passed and signed in 02, requires that MCE automatically enroll customers. I'd put that at the beginning of that paragraph. And I might even bold it so people, you know, if they read it, they understand that didn't start here, it started in the legislature.
Great, thank you. Okay, yes.
I don't know if this applies now, but I wanted to read something because it just shows what people get, that I thought maybe it might apply, you know, to what we're trying to do. Our city manager put into our newsletter the first thing about the deep green that went out, and so it prompted quite a few emails. And this particular person, the reason why I'm reading this one is this particular person is, you know, he's not a hysteric, you know, kind of thing. So, but if he misunderstood it, it kind of concerns me, so I thought maybe it's really short. But he talked about the city manager sending out an email, and he said there was an update on MEA. Appears to me that the statement made by the city manager that continues to repeat, quote unquote, the same inaccuracies published by MEA. I would think the city would want to be accurate in what information it gives the public. It's my understanding that the electric source for the MEA renewable energy is generated some distance from Marin and is added to the electrical grid. Once placed on the grid, there's no assurance any of the power delivered to customers in Marin or Novato's Deep Green are even sourced by MEA. Once the power is on the grid, there's no possible distinction that can be made as to its source or type of generated power unless there's separate distribution lines. On the related note, residents can sign up for MEA's Deep Green Energy Program today. And then he has in bold, a resident who signs up for Deep Green Program will receive 100% of their energy from clean renewable sources. So he's objecting to the fact and believes that we're misrepresenting that. He said, how can you prove that if somebody signs up for 100%, how do you prove that their house is getting 100% green? So he felt that we need to be, and it isn't just him, it's quite a few people, that we really need to be accurate in explaining to people what it means, that it's more of a global, you know, he understands that. He understands that if you look at it globally, but he says that it appears, and the reason why people don't want to believe this is because we are giving the impression that the power that they're getting is different from their neighbors who didn't sign up. How do you get around that?
Yeah, so, you know, we do get this type of feedback from folks in the public from time to time, and unfortunately, it stems from just not really understanding the way that accounting is done for electricity, and because we are, we've actually taken a lot of steps in the last couple of months to try and help with that issue. We've signed up with the climate registry as a way of providing some kind of a third-party benchmark, if you will, for the power supply that we have. And then we also do a lot of compliance reporting, like the compliance reporting that Kirby talked about tonight is something that all load-serving entities in California file with the CPUC to verify what their renewable content is. In addition to that, we are going through the process now, and this has gone to our technical committee for discussion. We're going through the process of getting our Deep Green product actually certified by Green E, which is a third-party that certifies voluntary renewable products all across the United States, actually, and beyond the United States. So there are a lot of there's a lot of accounting that we can point to, and we can certainly get into a discussion about how that accounting is done. But as far as how it's framed in our marketing material, it is certainly accurate and lines up with how other load-serving entities that have green programs, green pricing programs, describe their programs. And there's not really another way to describe it that would be accurate. However, there might be some minor word adjustments that you could suggest. If you have any specific suggestions on how we might frame it differently, we can. But I think really this stems from more of a lack of understanding of the power grid, which is kind of a deeper issue that's hard to accomplish through a marketing piece.
Well, I think what he was saying, which I can understand his point, he's like, you're going to get 100%. If you sign up for this program, you are going to receive 100% renewable. So is that true? Is his own house, and if his neighbor doesn't sign up for it, is he going to get green energy and the people next to him, or it's not?
Yeah, I can weigh in. I mean, it's a tough question to answer with a simple yes/no, because you kind of have two issues in play. You have a discussion that's really exclusively focused on electrical engineering, and we could bring somebody in, bore you to tears with power flows and how those work, but it kind of, in order to keep that discussion on the sidelines, folks like the California Energy Commission and the Public Utilities Commission have spent a great deal of time developing standards for how it is that renewable energy is accounted for. And so while you can't necessarily track the way an electron flows through the system and assure that one electron, electron A gets to customer A and match it that way, what you can do is you can buy renewable energy in sufficient quantities for that customer, because basically the way that the electric system works, and I've given this analogy before, and I can't really think of a better one. So, you have a bunch of different producers of power, both renewable and conventional, and it's not unlike they were all turning on hoses and emptying them into the pool, into a pool, and then you have folks like MEA and other load-serving entities that are really kind of kneeling around the edge of the pool with straws, and they're kind of taking out what they need at the times that they need it, but at the same time they're contributing to what flows into the pool, whether it's renewable or conventional. In Marin's case, for Deep Green customers, we are literally buying 100% of every customer's energy requirements from renewable sources.
Kirby, hold that thought, because I came up with some language. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, go ahead. I want somebody else to take this one up.
Is it fair to say, in simplified terms, that the power we are purchasing on that customer's behalf is green?
Absolutely.
See, that's that to me.
I think that's your
that's it.
sound.
Because I think that's what he understands it. He's just saying you're misrepresenting it. So, but the way that said, but the way you said it sounds better.
And that's kind of what we're saying.
Yeah, I don't.
But I like the way that was said. That was like clear.
Okay, I wrote it down.
Yeah. That's probably the most succinct way of expressing it, that we're buying enough renewable energy to meet their needs on their behalf.
Yeah.
Well, Kirby, we might try to stress that in some of this literature that's going to people then, because I have been confronted with the same question many times, especially in the early days when we were getting this thing going. I know it's difficult to convince people, but I agree with you, Damon, if we talk about it from the standpoint of purchasing, not necessarily what's going into their house.
Exactly.
Well,
But if
it's not like we're unique. When PG&E says it's, RPS, 16 or 17%, it's not going to their house.
Right, exactly.
Necessarily.
But it helps. 16% of the world is helped.
Well, it's our grid.
Yeah,
right? It's
grid.
not
It's
quite
our area.
below, it's our
someday.
grid. Yeah. Yes.
So could we perhaps include that phrase somewhere in this enrollment paragraph, and maybe also say for more information, and then have a more detailed
Right.
explanation on the website. Because in here, it's not practical to put that in there. And a lot of people aren't interested in that anyway. But for those people who really want, the long-winded explanation, could you put something on the website that would provide that for them and put the link, in here somewhere?
Yes, we can definitely do that.
I just think maybe it's a way of satisfying people, and that way also when we get questions, we can say, oh, here's the link.
That's
You
right.
just go right here, and it's got the full explanation for you.
We can definitely do that. I'm actually currently in the process of redeveloping the website for updated text and fresh information and a fresh look and feel, so that's something that I'll definitely incorporate into it.
Great, thank you.
Damon, it's really not much different than the municipal water supply. There it comes from different sources. On any given day, at any point in the year, different amounts are coming from the Russian River versus reservoirs.
Right.
It's just, that's the simplest analogy to draw for people. It's just say, I don't know about the Northern Agency, but just say it's not unlike where your water comes from. It's just you're choosing sources of water, in this case electricity that are renewable versus the Russian River compared to that. I think people would cement that in their head a little bit easier than, or just put just a picture. People don't want to spend all day trying to understand this stuff, right? So give them something that's a real clean analogy, even if it's a picture. Forget where it's purchased or who generated it or where it comes from, because the amount of time they're willing to devote to this is very.
Or we've used the pool analogy.
Actually, a graphic illustration, I think, is the easiest for an analogy.
It's just a bigger pool than your local water supply.
The only other thing that I would add about that is just the simple economic discussion of supply and demand. There's only so much energy that can go into the grid, and if there's demand for green, clean energy, then there's a demand for it, and it will be supplied. If we weren't here, there would be less demand for it. And so that's another simple way to maybe, just say, look, if you sign up, well, you're already signed up. Maybe if you sign up for Deep Green, there's more demand, and then there'll be more suppliers that will be providing this product. So it's circular.
Chris.
I realize we're trying to pack a lot of information on the back of the sheet. Would it be worth putting a couple of notes about net metering and the advantages with MES?
It's something that we can consider. I'm not sure that it suits or fits very well with terms and conditions of service. I think that these are generally meant to be about basically the rules and what it means to be a Marine Clean Energy customer and the very basics of enrolling. But we might be able to find somewhere in this document have something about net energy metering.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we also have the opportunity, as was mentioned previously, to get a lot more detailed information onto the website. This is kind of the overview. Welcome, you're being enrolled. Here's how to opt out. The terms and conditions are kind of a legal piece of the process here to say, hey, these are the terms and conditions. If you don't opt out, here are the terms that you're subject to or agreeing to. But I think that you're right, that information about the net energy metering program is really important, and we'll certainly have that on the website. And all of the comments that y'all are making tonight, we don't have to get into wordsmithing necessarily, but all your comments will take into account and incorporate them into the next iteration.
Yeah, there might be, advantages of joining. So I don't know if it's on, I tend to agree with you, the purpose of this, but obviously our publications, there's some other advantages.
Overall, I think it's an excellent letter. It's what we ask for, and it gives very direct notification of the change.
Good touch with the different languages, too. Okay, anything else on the letter?
Right.
actually, you're still
We can
going,
move
right?
on to the next slide. All right, next up is talking about deep green marketing. So you may have seen the press release that was published a couple of weeks ago about our Heart Deep Green promotional campaign that we launched. The purpose of the campaign is to increase participation in our Deep Green program. And so what we've done is partnered with 11 local nonprofit organizations here in Marin who have agreed to promote Deep Green for us via their websites, social media, newsletters, and face-to-face with their constituents and customers. And basically, if they get someone to sign up for Deep Green, the person who signs up can vote for them either on our website when they sign up or on the phone when they sign up. And when we reach 1,000 Deep Green customers, we are going to donate $1,000 to the winning organization. So we'll basically tally up all the votes. So right now, if you call our call center and ask to sign up for Deep Green, hopefully you'll already know about the campaign. But if you don't, our call center will let you know about it and ask which organization you would like to vote for. The same goes through the website. There's just a question on the form as you're completing your enrollment. And so far, it's generated some really great buzz. We just launched the campaign about 2 weeks ago, and since then, we are, our Deep Green enrollments are almost 3 times what the average usually is. So we're pretty excited about that, and I just think it's a fun and exciting campaign where we can support a local community group and also encourage Deep Green enrollments and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So it's a pretty exciting program. There's some, I think the flyer that we gave to the nonprofits to hand out to their constituents is included in your board packet, and we have extras if you're interested in having those to hand out. We also had another Deep Green flyer that is more general that we can use in the long term beyond this campaign about enrolling in Deep Green. And we've got a bunch of these made up, so if any of you would like them for any organizations that you're affiliated with or for your cities and towns, please let me know, because I would be happy to have you disseminate them for us. All right, any questions? Next slide. Great. The next slide is about our advertising campaign, which is scheduled to start actually tomorrow. No, today's the 1st, today. It's scheduled to start today. It did start today with the bus tails. So basically, we have a campaign running from March through June, and we are featuring a variation of 4 different ads. They're going to be featuring our customers, 2 residential customers, and 2 commercial customers who provide testimonials basically about why they choose Marin Clean Energy. So Green Ideals is the company who helped do the graphic design for the campaign. And what I have listed here are the venues that we'll be advertising in. So we'll be advertising in the Marin IJ with a half-page weekly ad to run every Sunday from March through June. And we will also have digital ads on their website. So there will be one long sort of panoramic ad on their website. There are some other ads that are different shapes that will, be included in the midst of articles. They also have a component of their ad campaign that runs ads for us in Yahoo emails and Facebook and some other online advertisements, so you're likely to see our ads throughout that. We'll be running half-page ads weekly in the Pacific Sun, also March through June, and also have a panoramic ad on their website. We've reserved 20 bus tails to have the advertisements displayed and 10 bus shelters. So, yes.
Where are the bus shelters located? Are we picking those locations?
We were able to pick only one of those locations was I able to choose, and it was the Larkspur Ferry Terminal. The rest are scattered throughout Marin, and to be honest, I can't remember the street addresses off the top of my head, but I'd be happy to circulate that. It's something I think we could also go over at the executive committee. Thank you. So I did include some of the examples of our ads, so the next slide. This is one of our customers, a commercial customer in Mill Valley from Nochi Gelato. And this is an example of one of the half-page ads. I believe this will be running in the Pacific Sun. This is an advertisement of some potential residential customers here in Marin. This will also be, I believe all of these will actually be running in the Pacific Sun. The next ad is also of residential customers who have signed up for Deep Green. Read it, that's right. And the last ad is of Jackson's Hardware, who is our other commercial business who will be featured in the ads. So those are basically the main design for the ads. Different variations of them will be running. There'll be shorter text on some things, more text on others. And actually, we just had a bunch of bus tails printed, and they printed more than we had ordered, but generously gave us the extra prints. So we have a couple of them here today. We can show you.
Screen for green.
So we have several extra of these two ads in particular. The other one is of the.
Let's see the second. Yeah.
Oh, here, hold on. Here.
They want to see the second one.
Sarah was so good.
Thank you so much.
That's a great shot.
That's a good one.
That's a great shot.
And also discussed at our executive committee and I think maybe even the technical committee that I've missed. But it's included here. It's the finalized version. It's taken into account your comments and suggestions from those meetings, and I've included it here for reference.
Great. Any questions for Jamie?
I just want to comment on the comparison graph. The word small is used. These costs through a small charge that ensures BG's remaining customers are not adversely affected. Seems to me, and this is already, I guess the barn door is closed, but in the future, using the word small or, I don't know what that means.
Where are you looking at?
I'm looking at this,
Paragraph.
about 4 lines down from the blue box,
Okay.
the lowest blue box. A charge, if you can use an example, is one thing, but small to someone might be one thing and to someone else quite another, just for future reference.
We're happy to take that out.
Yeah, it's a good suggestion, thanks.
Yeah, I think just deleting the word, because again, the numbers speak for themselves in the range you show. Okay, good suggestion. Members of the public on Jamie's communications update? Thumbs up?
That sounds good.
Okay, do we need to take any action on this item?
No, this is just informational only.
Item 7, budget adjustment for fiscal year 2012.
Thank you. First, I'd like to start by introducing John Maher, who's our accountant with Maher Accountancy. He's been helping us out essentially since we left the county. He's been doing a wonderful job for us, and so he's here this evening to discuss the 2 items which are on our agenda. The first is a minor budget adjustment for the current fiscal year. It's just accounting for additional information that we have to date to make sure that we have sufficient funds in each of the different line items as we finish up our fiscal year. And then the second budget item is for this coming year's fiscal year budget. So that budget we'll discuss that at a later point, but it will reflect our full rollout and the like. So with regards to the first budget, the key shifts here really relate to our execution of our most recent loan agreement with River City Bank and the bank fees associated with it. There's also a minor revision to our estimated interest charges for this fiscal year. And then we also have several certain costs associated with bringing on new staff, and so that's included office furniture and the like, and computers. So those are really the only revisions there. It's a net zero change in the budget. We're not asking for additional funds. We're just moving surplus money from certain columns to other columns where we would otherwise be cutting it closer. John, do you have any additional comments on?
No, I can say thank you very much. The role of the budget is, of course, the board giving authorization for management to spend money, and so part of our role as your outside accounting providers is we help watch out that things don't run out of control. So when when we get down to the end of the year, we're projecting. With some recent changes in staffing, we're projecting that some of the numbers are going to look a little close. A couple we know about, for instance, the cost to establish a new credit facility is there. We know about that. There are some other things where it looked like we're cutting it a little too close for comfort, and if it gets down to the wire and we run out of budget, we can't spend. So this is really a housekeeping thing to make sure that your board has authorized the money the management's spending. And I think Beth covered the details of what's happening here. I don't know if there are any particular questions.
Any questions?
Move to approve the budget yesterday.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? That carries. Item 8, adjusted MEA rates for fiscal year 2013.
At the last board meeting in February, I presented preliminary rates for the coming fiscal year, and those rates were really preliminary in the sense that they were still subject to revision based on the proposed budget, and a large part of that was the power purchase agreement for the Phase 2B load that was still pending in regards to the final pricing on that agreement and for those additional megawatt hours. So that agreement has since been executed. The prices are now known and locked in, and the proposed budget is being presented in the next agenda item. So we have revised the rates that were presented last time to be consistent now with the new lower cost of energy that we're projecting in the budget as a function of that, primarily of the Phase 2B agreement. So the revised rates are on an annualized basis. If you compare the revenues that MEA would recover with the current rates compared to the revenues that would be recovered under the proposed rates would yield $9 million per year lower revenues, and that's at the expanded sales that we anticipate with the new Phase 2B customer. So it's a reduction in rates of about $9 million on an annualized basis. The bulk of that reduction would go to the residential class. As you can see in the memo, there's a table that shows how these changes in revenues would be allocated to the different classes of customers that are served by MEA. So the bulk of the rate reductions would flow through to the residential customers for the reasons that we talked about at the last meeting. We look at cost of service, and we also look at the competitiveness of the rate in making the recommendations on how the different rates should be structured. Other classes that would see rate reductions would be the large commercial class, the industrial class, and the street lighting class. The other customer classes would see no change in their rates from where they are today. So the overall, under the proposed rates, the system average rate, which is simply a measure of total annual revenues divided by total projected kilowatt hour sales, would be about 6.9 cents per kilowatt hour. And that's down from, at current rates, that system average rate would be 7.8 cents per kilowatt hour. So it's really good news on the rate front. And again, this is largely, if not entirely, a function of the reduced prices that we are able to achieve in the final contract under the CNET agreement. As we mentioned before, these are still proposed rates subject to input, change, comment. They would be scheduled for finalization and adoption at the next board meeting in April, and then they would go into effect on July 1, which again is a little bit different than our typical cycle. Typically, the rates would go into effect at the start of the fiscal year, which would be April 1, but because of the kind of the uniqueness surrounding the rate restructuring, going to a flat generation rate, PG&E putting forth the conservation incentive adjustment, and then our expansion all happening on July 1. As we've discussed previously, these rates would go into effect at that time.
And again, this rate structure also part of the analysis related to the conservation incentive adjustment, right?
That's correct, and really where that shows up is on the residential rates. We're moving to a flat, equal cents per kilowatt hour rate. No longer will we be differentiating amongst the usage tiers the way that the current rates are structured. So for the main residential rate, the E1 rate, the most common, that flat rate would be 6.9 cents per kilowatt hour. That's the rate for the bulk of our customers are served on Schedule E1. And then, of course, PG&E will be still maintaining the overall tiered structure for the customer, but that'll be moved to the PG&E side of the bill. So that they're still going to be seeing the graduated electric rates in total, but from MEA, it's just going to be a flat rate.
Lynn.
I just want to, I'm always concerned in how we represent the numbers to the public. And I heard you say, if you blended all the rates together are among all the different types of ratepayers, it was, did I hear 6.9 cents? And that just happens to be the same number that's the E1 rate or the residential 1 rate? Is it happens to be one and the same number?
Correct.
Okay, so if we say, I'm not sure how meaningful the number, the average rate for Marine Clean Energy is 6.9 when you have all these different kinds of customers, and the biggest number of category of customers, I assume, is the residential customers in Marin County. And so more people would be paying 6.9 than any other rate, is that right?
Exactly.
So I'm just saying, I'm just asking that we're careful, and maybe this is a Jamie one answer or response, but I just want to make sure that we're really careful when we say average and which customer. And so, if a restaurant customer says, well, I'm not, they sign up or don't opt out, and all of a sudden they're realizing they're not at 6.9 or something like that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's a good point. The system average rate is it's a commonly used sort of benchmark. Just to simplify, really a very high level summarize the rate change. And of course, it's going to be different depending on the customer class that you're in, and then even within the customer class, it can be different depending on how you use energy and what rate schedule you're on. So I think you're making a very good point. And so, when we're communicating with the public in regards to rate changes, I think need to be careful. We just use this system average rate concept really to describe overall, on a programmatic basis what's happening with the rates. They can either go up or they can go down overall, and in this case, they're going down.
Anyone else on the board? John, how does that compare with the system average of PG&E's filing?
It's actually very close. The system average for PG&E, the residential rate for PG&E is 6.7 is what they're projecting it'll be when their rate goes flat in July. Right now it's still tiered, but they're telling us it'll be 6.7, and their overall system average, I believe, is 6.9 as well. So I think we're very, very comparable.
Aren't they planning on doing, or PG&E planning on doing time of use tiering?
I think that is in the works. I think that's on a longer sort of time frame, though. I think what they're looking at that, and they've implemented that for the commercial customers, and there's been plans to introduce that for the residential class. And I know that when that was brought before the CPUC, there was a delay in terms of when that might actually take place. So I don't think there's anything that's imminent on that front in regards to moving residential customers to a mandatory time of use pricing. But certainly that's something that is being considered by PG&E. I'm certain of that.
I mean, and that's one of the prime justifications they're using for the smart meter.
Yeah.
Program. So, I would expect that's going to be rolled out one of these days, and I'm just wondering if we would follow suit, if this agency would follow suit, or is any consideration even been given to that?
Right, and right now we have optional time of use rates for residential customers, but they're not mandatory. The customer wants to manage their energy according to price signals that vary by time of day. Then we actually have a number of optional rate schedules that they could choose to take service on. There's been some talk in the industry of mandatory time of use pricing for customers. And that's not something that MEA has considered to date. I mean, that would be, if PG&E goes in that direction, I suppose that's a topic that, MEA would want to consider, but we haven't really considered that up to this point.
Okay, members of the public on the rates, yes, Gene.
Setting the 6.9 equal to PG&E 6.9. Typically gets around the plan what we discussed last month. Do you have a feel for how firm the PG&E number is? Has it been approved by the PUC or something of the sort?
Well, what we, right now, as I mentioned, the PG&E E1 rate, the generation rate, is tiered. So what we know is on a class average basis, they're at about 6.7 cents per kilowatt hour. And also what PG&E has told us is that when they move to a flat rate in July, that they anticipate it'll be 6.7 cents per kilowatt hour. So their current rates are approved. The change in July is just supposed to be a kind of a revenue neutral flattening. So if it's not 6.7, it's going to be very close to that. So I would say it's pretty firm.
Two questions, really actually related to the public information and public education. It would be interesting for MEA even soon, if it's possible, to translate what this 6.9 cent per kilowatt hour rate would be and the proposed differential, because it's probably $2 a month or something. One, okay. So maybe you've already done that, Jamie, but it just seems to me like that's what, is that in there? Okay, that's what people want to hear, so I look forward to looking at that. And then the other is, are the the municipal utilities moving to a flat rate structure as well? Or many of them already on a flat rate?
I think, I don't think they, for the most part, the municipal utilities move to this 5-tiered structure. So it's my understanding that some of them have a flat rate, and then some of them might have like a 2-tiered or even a 3-tiered rate, with the differences in the tiered pricing being fairly gradual relative to what they've been with the investor-owned utilities. So I don't think they're moving, to the extent that the munis have a tiered rate. I don't think there's any reason to believe they're moving to a flat rate. I think they're happy with
what they're doing.
Yeah.
I guess, so where that's leading me is there a relevance, just again for sort of this sake of public comparison or consumer comparison, to have a box somewhere on our website or someplace where it shows MEA's rates and how that compares not only to PG&E but the average public utility, perhaps Southern California Edison, so that it shows where we are on the spectrum, because my sense is we will be neither at the very bottom but neither at the top. So It's just, again, just a way to kind of communicate how we fit into the whole big picture in California.
Isn't there a gag order against former board members?
Can you guys explain what we're doing with the EL1 or the CARE, the low income rate? Because from looking at this, it looks the same as everyone else's rate. I understand that I think these are being moved to the distribution side, the cost differentials. But in looking at our rates and how a customer might look at these rates, if our CARE low income rate is the same as everybody else's in the residential tier, that just sends a very strange message. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and that's something that I think I mentioned last time, and I didn't mention this time, is that part of the change to the rate flattening on the PG&E side and the imposition of this conservation incentive adjustment is that they'll be providing the entire CARE discount. So the CARE customers, today, the discount has been sort of split between the generation provider, which is MEA, and the distribution provider. And as of July, the entirety of that discount will be provided on the distribution side of the bill. So the CARE customer still gets that full discount. It's just now entirely provided through the PG&E, a lower PG&E distribution and effect rate. So
That may be something that you want to address though directly, because I think that's confusing. People don't understand the difference between distribution and generation.
yeah. Yep.
Although they probably just look at how much they're paying as opposed to
Look at that, yeah.
getting into the fine
I think that,
detail.
the IJ will say, look, low income people have lost the rate because it looks like it's the same. It's just a thought.
I mean, we can certainly clarify that they haven't lost the rate. Yeah, so good, fair point. John, if you can maybe get on that issue. Okay, Barbara?
One more. I kind of missed the time to talk about this in the last round, but this is the same topic anyway. So this is the current chart, and I've been playing a little bit with this chart, and I don't know if this is actually going to be sent out to customers or given to the media or whatever, but I think that it's still a little confusing, and I have only 4 copies of this thing, which is just really a rough version. But so I'll kind of give you one to each table. What I wanted to suggest is to separate out the green bars from the rate itself. And I also strongly advise you not to make PG&E blue, especially not royal blue. In case you don't know this, they've done studies on people's reactions to colors, and royal blue is the most desirable color for everyone. That's been true since the 50s. And, well, I was thinking that the distribution would be gray for gray wires, and then PG&E's generation would be brown. It would be and it could just be a box rather than having the whole thing. And then light green would be all light green, and dark green would be all dark green. I thought that the little piece on the top of the dark green, the deep green, looks like you're only getting 5% deep green instead of all deep green, so I wanted to warn against that. And then on the bottom, right now, this whole thing here is actually repetitive, and it makes it more confusing because the top 4 lines from renewable content down to transmission and distribution, all of that is what you're seeing up here on the top. And so I would suggest just having those 2 bottom lines, it says the PCIA and the franchise fee, and that would just appear in a little extra gray box that's underneath this, but you would be able to see that it's added. So your total cost is the is down here. You'd have the total rates and then the total cost of the bill. It would be two different lines, and it would be quite a bit simpler to look at it this way. And I think it would be more clear what's going on. And I also changed the little discussion down below, because I think that it's worth pointing out that what I made it say is that please note that the regulators of the California Public Utilities Commission are allowing PG&E to charge Marin Clean Energy customers an extra fee to help PG&E pay for energy purchase before MCE was created, because that power costs more than it would today. And it just rewords that a little bit. And then on the franchise fee, this is another star down below. So CPUC is also allowing PG&E to impose a franchise fee on PG&E customers. For most MCE residential customers, the franchise fee averages 1.8 cents a month, whatever it is. So then you could put a little box, if you want to let the CPUC know what you think of that, you can tell them. But I'm just kidding. But anyway, it I think takes away from the attractiveness of the PG&E side, and it explains that there are extra little fees that are being added on. It also, I don't know whether in July, if we have the CIA in addition to the PCIA, that we'll have to add that to this as well. But anyway, I just think that this much makes it a little bit more direct. And then if you wanted on another page, you could have this, this entire thing here, so that you would see it in two different ways. One would be a table and one would be a graph. But
I think I've seen some head nods on some of the issues you've raised. And Director Sears and I were kind of talking favorably about some of the language you proposed. Why don't we take these comments under advisement at this point? Thank you.
I've got a quick question.
Yes.
My initial reaction would be that making a flat rate could be.
Can you say your name?
Simon. I used to be an intern and is student. If you know what's going on here.
We know you. We just wanted to get it on the record.
Yeah, just that the flat rate, while it's a good idea, just might be detrimental to an energy efficiency effort that, the high users in Tier 4 don't see that same incentive coming on. So, to address that.
And I have several slides during the regulatory update that relate to sort of more of like a visual representation of what's really happening with the conservation incentive adjustment. And so hopefully that'll address that concern.
Great. Okay, I think we're done with comments, questions. Bring it back to the board for a motion on the proposed adjusted MEA rates for fiscal year 2013.
One question before you close it out. John or Kirby, in terms of how you relate the revenues that are in the box on the cover, from the intro page back to the modified accrual basis, how do those tag over? Given that if you want from July, should be divided 72 by 12 to get 6, 36 instead of 58. How do those?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the numbers that are shown in this table on the rates memo that total $72+ million, that's a 12-month look at the new rates. That's so it's if our proposed rates were in effect for a 12-month period. Now, these won't go into effect until July.
So it's July to April.
So it's July, well, it's really July to the, June 30 of the following year. So that's not, it doesn't align with our fiscal year. And so the budget is, it has our current rates in effect up to July 1 of this year. And so that's why it's different.
Okay, can I have a motion?
I'll move to approve.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? That matter carries. All right, item 9, proposed budget for fiscal year 2013.
Thank you. I'll do a brief introduction of this, although John will be the one speaking more generally about it. I think that what you'll see is there's a lot of consistency and then several large leaps that you'll see in our budget. And those leaps really relate to the enrollment of Phase 2B. And there's really 3 factors at work there: the number of customers, the volume of energy, and the cost of energy. And so those are all obviously interrelated. And so when you're looking at the sales of electricity and the cost of energy, that's a volumetric increase. When you're looking at staffing, that's the amount that we need to sort of be able to interface with our customers at the level that we need for our larger customer base. Data management, we discussed this contract earlier during the consent agenda. That's also volumetric and customer-based. Various PG&E fees, which are charged on a per customer per month basis. And then finally, debt service, which is just the lead-in time when we're purchasing energy, but we've not yet received it from our customers. And so that's the general trends, but if John could touch on that more specifically.
Yeah. The big ticket items are obviously the electricity sales and cost of energy, and John DeLassy has done extensive modeling on that and pretty much followed the same methodology he'd done in the past. And remarkably, the projections are looking backwards, were reasonably close to what really happened. This year, of course, there are a lot of changes. We've got a big increase in customers after 3.5 months or so, and the rate changes. But so when we come down to it, when several months go by, maybe we get down to December, we may need to look at those numbers again. Again, though, the perspective on passing the budget is not so much on what revenue is going to come in, but what expenditures you're going to authorize. In the situation here where we've got things that are directly variable to revenue volume, we do our best. But again, management is constricted so as to not spend more than you authorize. So if there's some big change where revenue goes way up, we're going to have to get a budget adjustment to cover the additional cost of the energy. That's nothing really to worry about at this point, because as long as we get a margin of above the cost, we won't be hurt. Beth talked about some of the details here. So most notably, in hard dollars, of course, the data management, which again we talked earlier about the function of that being the number of customers, which has gone up a lot in the volume. So no surprise there, a little trimming on the average rate. And of course, PG&E, the real number has gone way up. In fact, it was small enough at our lower customer number level before that we didn't segregate that out as a separate item, but this year, because of the big volume increases, we're seeing that go up. Now, some of these volume-related ones are scaling in starting around July. So if we were to roll that forward, kind of like the question about the reconciliation of the rate calculations, the average monthly numbers are going to be bigger once the full year comes in. And one thing on the debt service, in scaling up the customers, there's a certain lag time. So customer A starts service middle of July. They run service for a month. We're paying Shell or whoever the provider is shortly after the cutoff date of the month. It's 45 days before we even bill the customer, or 30 days after they started service. But there's a long lag time where we're waiting to bill, and then later on we bill, and they've got some time to pay. So there has to be some capitalization there. So that's just kind of the overview on that. We've got a certain level, because it's important that we don't run short of money, there's a certain amount of conservatism in the revenue projections, although not trimming it too tightly, because you don't want to fall short. So hopefully things will look as robust as are projected there, but there's just some conservatism where we're not scaling up expenses as fast as we hope the revenue is going to go up. So again, this is for you to authorize management to start spending along the plan that is laid out here. And at some point during the year, there'll probably be some request for some kind of fine tuning.
Any questions for John?
I'd like to understand this data management cost, going from $350,000 to $1.9 million. Is not a lot of that a computer in a computer someplace? I mean, does it take man hours to do that? It's such a big jump and a big number. I think we ought to understand.
Yeah, sure. I can comment on that and feel free to add to it, John. Just to going back to the contracts we discussed at the beginning of the meeting, Noble Energy Solutions provides the data management services to us, and we pay them on a per customer basis. So as we increase the customer count or the meter count, we're paying them substantially more per customer. And they do, yes, they do have a lot of information in their computer. In fact, right now they're very busy entering lots of new information into the computer. And they do day by day tracking of that information and providing reports to us. A lot of data manipulation is required. And the data is used on a routine basis to collect usage from PG&E when they read the meters, and then to submit charges to PG&E based on what our rates are for each customer, keeping track of which customer class they are in. And then also doing reconciliation to make sure that the revenue that comes in for each customer matches up with the account that they billed them, and then also keeping us informed on unbilled usage and bills that are past due payment, so that we can take actions needed to collect on those. So those are the types of functions that are provided to us under the data management
Are they
line
doing
item.
their own entry, data entry? I mean, is already done for them?
They are doing the data entry. I mean, we receive data initially from PG&E, and it's entered into the system through Noble, but they actually are the keeper of much of the day-to-day data that's needed for customers, and they keep it updated themselves.
We're just taking off on Jonathan's comments about contracts. That's a very large number, and I assume that's one that is vetted by what the competition pays for the same service.
It's also want to just make the point that this uptick, this large increase in that cost, that's a function of our existing agreement with Noble and the fact that we now have more accounts. The way that this agreement was structured, and because of the phase-in of MEA, where it started off very small, a relatively few number of customers, Noble actually invested quite a bit in systems and setting up, and they essentially took a loss on the first phase. But the agreement contemplated this level of service and this number of accounts. There was hard-coded into the agreement that there would be up to 71,000 customers, 800,000 megawatt hours. So that was the nature of sort of the value of the agreement that was struck with Noble at the time, two years or so ago. So while it looks like a big increase, really what it is a completion of the phase-in. Excuse me.
I understand that. Sure, Lisa Heinrich.
Yeah. Thank you.
Alexandra.
My question goes to the budgeted net increase in fund balance, which is shown for the 2012-2013 to be almost 2.5 million. And my question is that, how is that number determined? Or is there a guideline for that number? I mean, obviously it's, the top line minus all of the expenses. But my question is that a considered number? Is it appropriate for, you know, the overall budget, et cetera?
Yeah, the number as a function of revenue is kind of in line around 5%. Although that you might see in many governments, this agency has a number of things that are unique, and the margin of discretionary expenses is actually relatively small because we have a big chunk of money goes right out the door for the energy costs. But what's really unique here is we're in this extreme growth mode where there's a lot of uncertainty. So would it be necessary to have that kind of margin indefinitely and no plan to spend it? You know, probably not. But right now we have the uncertainty of the conversion of customers and all the various other factors that go into this conversion. So I think we've got some good history in this in this fiscal year that we're ending now. This next year is a big change. So if things were rolling right along, you might consider that in a rate adjustment in the future. You have a rate adjustment that there probably is a little bit of uncertainty, and John can address this better, about how that's actually going to shake out. You do the modeling as best you can, and you see how things go. So we didn't intend to come up with that number. Basically, we looked at the rate structure that was being considered and the expected costs, and kept the costs down to what was reasonable minimums, and that's what's there this year.
And one last comment on that, it's really more of a residual amount than it is a budgeted line item, I would say. Thanks.
John?
Yeah, my question is on the flip side of that one, which is, obviously, as you scale, you're going to have some initial costs, like marketing costs and things like that, because you're going out to more people with information, and there's ramping up. But where's the scale going to come in? Because, or was it the past set of financials more of an anomaly because we held down costs in other ways, so that your margins are compressing? Obviously, the rates are lower, so that's a big driver off the top. But so where, versus what's the guarantee PG&E, is it 9% or something like that, their return on equity? Where do we expect? I think that's more of a planning issue. Is where obviously this next year is going to be a little bit of an anomaly. Hopefully, we should have some visibility as we look out past that, where these increased ramping of volume and necessary sort of fixed costs that will go with that kind of start to reach some predictable or more predictable margin. So that would be that's my. You can't. I don't know if you have an answer for that, but it's something where certainly we need to start thinking about that.
Yeah, I think that's a great comment, and next year will be very different because we'll have the luxury of kind of making more decisions based on policy objectives. For example, how much do we want to spend on marketing now that the program is up and running? What types of campaigns do we think are important? Right now, many of these line items are kind of by necessity. We know that we need to do a lot of communicating right now. We expect to see kind of a similar, some things will remain flat. Legal counsel is likely to remain relatively flat. And the fees, as you mentioned, the data management and the service fee with PG&E is going to be a pretty fixed cost once we're at full rollout. And keep in mind that this is only going to we'll be at full rollout for a partial year, a good portion of a year, but we might see a slight uptick in those fees once we get to a full, complete fiscal year. But it will be interesting next year to make some decisions more based on what our policy objectives are and less based on our actual needs for expansion.
Len?
And looking, this is, for the amount of money in the budget, I've never seen a budget it's a $58 million budget on half a sheet of paper. That's impressive. I just want to see a little bit more, detail, or maybe we can do footnotes, or maybe there's more backup. Like we have, just looking at the categories, we have staffing, technical consultants, legal counsel, general and administration, so someone would want to be able to, I mean, I can tell the difference between legal counsel and technical, I think. But I'm just saying, it just seems like it needs, and this other category, other services, and I see there's a footnote that it was included in some other category last year, but it's different. It's just not, and someone looks at this, I don't think they get a really good handle on what is in each of these categories. Either it can be done with footnotes or something. It's just a suggestion.
Do you want to touch on that?
Well, I can touch on my perspective. There are details below those which would be fine to be published, but I think one of the things that we try to do is keep things in categories so that if there is a minor miscalculation on one particular vendor, one particular line versus another, it gives management a little discretion to move things around. And sometimes when you produce a huge amount of detail in a budget, then there's some confusion about whether the board is, how detailed of a budget was the board approving. But certainly on those items, if it's the board's pleasure, we can produce that.
Well, I'm just giving a suggestion, like, I happen to be familiar with the Marin County Bar Association budget, all $170,000 of it on 6 pages down to, down to the penny. So as I'm looking at 58 million to 177,000, and they're pretty polar opposites.
Yeah, and I think
that's all.
Yeah, I'd like to make an additional note on that, and that is your board last year approved a budget simplification. So there was significantly greater detail before, down to, $500 for postage and things like that. And it was a decision of the executive committee to simplify that, to allow discretion in those subcategories. And maybe, we can discuss ways that we can provide additional detail to the board on where funds are spent while still allowing flexibility to, for minor budget adjustments between similar categories to continue that based on the authorization of the board.
I think we could handle that with a policy of what's minor, that's within the Dawn's discretion of minor budget executives. But I saw an item here where you're asking the board for moving monies around because the legal counsel amazingly didn't spend their budget, so you had money to put it around in other places. That's the problem when you put new people on the board and they weren't here last year, and we asked the same questions, and you have to bear with us on that. I'm just throwing out my concerns. Is I just think for the public, I just don't think that this is enough, and maybe there's a way that, like I mentioned, you can do it with a footnote or something like that. So this is what's handed out, but people have the ability to get further information if they want it.
Be interested in hearing from other board members on that. As was noted, we used to have arguably too much detail.
Right, so you can go from one
Jonathan,
end to the
I don't
other.
know if you want to weigh in on that.
Well, I think it gets back to what you want this board to be. We've talked about this a number of times. Like, do we want to really debate wordsmithing marketing materials at board meetings versus this being an operating entity that develops that expertise through in-house and outside folks? The same thing would be true about budget. Where I would assume the executive committee is getting the more detailed breakdown of this and reviewing it in more detail. So, it depends how dirty you want to, or how much you want your hands in the pie at a board level, versus at sort of a finance committee type, executive committee type level. So I think that's something we should discuss, given that basically is all, 9/10 or 2/3 of this board is new people. So
Right.
in the last
I
year
think
or
it
so.
is timely with so many new members. Anyone else have any thoughts?
I think you can accomplish both. I think we could be approving the summary page, but there are attachments with greater detail, some 6 to 10 pages, that provide detail. But we'd actually be approving the summary itself.
Yeah, I'll give you an example. The Larkspur city budget is 13 million. and it's like 50 pages long, you know. So I think Chris gave a really good suggestion on, you know, on a middle ground. This is a great summary, but just a short detail. Doesn't have to be exhaustive, but that's what I would like to see.
John, any thoughts on that?
It's not a problem to do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyone else have any thoughts on this? I think that's a good suggestion, good middle ground on that. Gene?
I certainly agree with the simple budget approach, and maybe suggest that the monthly reporting of actual expenses might be more detailed.
Okay, need a motion on the proposed budget for fiscal year 2013. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Item 10, regulatory update in abridged form. We're still adjusting to that.
Yeah. Although I have to say, I can't remember the last time I presented so early in the evening. So this is kind of a treat. Everybody's awake. First, I just wanted to thank the technical committee. There was a regulatory workshop held during the technical committee this past month. And essentially during that meeting, we touched on an overview of the regulatory framework, key decisions and proceedings that have been going on in the past year, and what we see as key items to focus on in the coming year. And so, you know, it really does highlight that our work at the commission is really an essential function, and even though it is sometimes dry, I really do appreciate the attention that the board has been giving to this matter. So on that note, I just wanted to mention that in your board packet, as part of the technical committee meeting, we developed an acronym list of regulatory acronyms, since we love to use the acronyms. And so when you're talking about LSEs and IOUs and CHP and all of that, just ask the technical committee. They know all the answers now. And you all have the acronym list. So hopefully you find that helpful, and to the extent that, you know, there's other ways that the communication can be bridged to make regulatory a little bit more accessible, because it really does interface not only with the needs of the board, but also members of the public. They don't ask regulatory questions, but it's the regulatory sphere that often impacts our customers. So, so that's generally what we did at the technical committee. So some of these slides are going to be familiar to those members. Today I'm just going to touch on, first, this was part of the regulatory overview. These are the key issues that we face at the commission. Jurisdictional issues, so this relates to the limited jurisdiction that the commission has over CCAs, and how do we interface with the commission given that limited jurisdiction. Cost shifting issues, this relates to whether charges should be charged to a generation function or to a distribution function, and if it's charged to a distribution function, then our customers will also be paying that charge. And then the third component is just competitive issues, which is how do you ensure a fair playing field in the regulatory arena. But the one item that I'm going to talk about today is, if you go on to the next slide. Sorry. Dawn's going to be turning my slides for me today. Is the conservation incentive adjustment, and this is the rate design that is going to be implemented in July of this coming year. And so I thought that I would explain it in words and explain it in pictures so folks really have a strong understanding of this. So when people are asking questions about it, you'll be fully equipped to, you know, you'll have the full understanding of it. So what's happening with the conservation incentive adjustment is the tiered residential rates, we'll speak specifically about the generation portion of that, is going to be broken into two components. A flat rate, a flat generation rate and a tiered conservation incentive adjustment. So the conservation incentive adjustment is going to be a rate component that is approved by the commission, and that's charged by PG&E. And so this is not associated with generation, it's not associated with generation costs. So if you could go to the next slide. So currently, when you're looking at the tiers, you see sort of a step up in the cost of the generation function. If you go to the next slide. But what's going to happen under the conservation incentive adjustment is there's going to be a flattening of the generation rate, but then it's going to be coupled with this conservation incentive adjustment. So if you're in the lower tiers, you're actually going to receive a credit on your bill for each of the kilowatt hours that you use. But at a certain point, you're going to switch over into being charged amounts over and above the flat generation rate. And this is intended to encourage conservation. So it depends on how much energy you use in a month, whether your conservation incentive adjustment is going to be positive or negative. So if you go to the next component, so you'll see over here, this is, again, just the original generation rate. And this is the generation rate with the conservation incentive adjustment. So what you're looking at is, the end result is that stepped up line. So customers, a PG&E customer should see no difference in their bill. But it does impact us and how we design our rates. So right now we have a tiered rate design, and that's going to be shifted over to a flat rate design. And so when you're talking to, for example, folks in the solar industry, you know, they're accustomed to looking at generation rates, for example, but really they need to think about the generation rate plus the conservation incentive adjustment. And when customers are looking at their overall rate, they need to look at, you know, their flat rate plus their conservation incentive adjustment. But when they're deciding between whether or not they want to be a Marin Clean Energy customer, or a Deep Green customer, or a PG&E customer, then they're just looking at this generation function of the tier. If you could go forward 2 slides. So why does this matter? We discussed this extensively last year, and so several of the board members are new, so they weren't here for this exciting time. One of the components of this is this takes away a lot of our discretion regarding how do we encourage conservation. Right now, our conservation signals are stronger than PG&E's, so now essentially our rates are going to be flat. So we no longer have control over that component and serving, you know, policies and serving the needs of our customers in that way. So it's more general approach with having this flat rate design. In addition, why CIA matters is there is a cost shifting component here. So the conservation incentive adjustment, if you look only at that non-bypassable charge, you add it up over the entirety of PG&E's service territory, it's intended to be revenue neutral. So PG&E doesn't make money, doesn't lose money, it's just revenue neutral over the entire PG&E service territory. But in sub-territories, it is not revenue neutral. And so, in fact, in our service territory, there's a negative revenue impact from the implementation of this policy in our service territory. And then I mentioned before the jurisdictional component, which is just who should be allowed to determine the conservation signal. Now this is going to be determined through the CPUC's approval of PG&E's rates. And also, you know, we've faced in our customers in certain ways that it changes the opportunities for CCAs to launch based on tiers and other factors. So I just wanted to give an overview and an explanation of what exactly is happening with the conservation incentive adjustment, the CIA, since it is a little bit complicated, and since it's going to be impacting our customers starting in July. Yeah.
So we're trying to do something on the computer, right, where somebody can go in and plunk in a number and figure out where they're going to go. So will this thing be factored in so that people can, the ones, especially ones that were in tier 1 and tier 2, which you're going to be paying a little bit more, this might affect the fact that maybe it won't be as much of a difference for them because they're going to get a credit. So will that show up in the computer program?
The CIA will be incorporated into any kind of cost calculations that we have on our website. So assuming, for the cost calculations that are applied to the July, customers who are enrolled in July, and the change in July. So the CIA would definitely be included.
And because we go flat, and everybody's gonna be on the same rate from tier 1 through tier 5, how do the people who were tier 1, tier 2 get a credit? How's that determined?
Yeah, so the way that, if you could go back one slide. So the way that this actually works, so if you're looking at this is sort of post-implementation of the conservation incentive adjustment, and this is layering over the two components. And so when you're looking at this rectangular block here, this is what Marin Energy Authority would be charging. And similarly, PG&E is also going to have a flat rate, so they're going to be charging a flat rate as well. So it actually, for the residential customers, it's going to make the comparison very easy because you don't have to worry about different tiers kicking in at different rates. You don't have to worry about various components. But what's happening is there's something called a non-bypassable charge. So all of the customers are going to pay this charge or receive a credit, as the case may be. It's a little bit complicated. So when you are a low user of electricity, you're going to receive a credit of this amount on your bill. And that's a non-bypassable charge that's charged by PG&E. But if you're a high user of electricity, you're going to be charged an amount. That's the conservation incentive adjustment. So when you are adding together the flat component and the tiered component, the result is, to the customer who's just getting their bill in the mail, paying the amount, it's going to look like this. But there's just an additional step placed in there.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's in the off the net number, right? Not
Yeah, so when you're looking at...
the CIA.
Right, exactly. And so you would add together all the factors, and you put the solar on your rooftop, and your usage is going to go down. Sorry, can you go back one slide again? I'm sorry.
It's going to push you down.
Thank you. So, right, exactly. So you're going to shift down, and you're going to pay not only less on the flat rate portion, but also you're either going to pay less high of a conservation amount, or you could even, depending on how much energy you're producing, you could shift into getting a credit on the conservation incentive adjustment. So there are those various factors. But when a solar installer or an individual who wants to put solar on their home is looking at the number, they really have to look at the whole shebang and not just the flat generation rate.
And Beth, is there any way that a customer is going, with their smart meter, be able to figure this out?
With their smart meter,
all of this sort of stuff.
all the charts and graphs and all of that. That's a good question. So the thing that's interesting a little bit about the conservation incentive adjustment is when you're looking at the charge, in fact, if you're using a very, very small amount of electricity, you're going to have a very small negative credit. And then for a little bit, the more that you use, the bigger your negative credit is going to be when you're sort of in the tier 1 phase. And then it reduces over time, and then at a certain point in time after you've used enough energy, then it flips over and becomes a positive credit. And so honestly, I don't think I would be the one that would want to explain that. But thankfully, the tool that Jamie's going to have on, you don't need a smart meter or an advanced degree in mathematics. You can just plug it into the tool that's going to be on our website to determine, what the benefit is and where you're at. But essentially, the end result is folks are going to end up in essentially the same place as they were before under the tiered structure, just there's an additional rate component that is neither associated with generation, nor transmission, nor distribution. It's just a charge that's intended to encourage conservation or penalize consumption, depending on your perspective.
One other thing about just communications with customers, I think that, the main thing that we're going to emphasize and be explaining and discussing with customers about the rates are just the flat charges. So it's actually it's unlikely to really even get to this point with most customers. The question is going to be, what do you charge? What does PG&E charge? What do I pay with you? What do I pay with PG&E? And the benefit with the CIA is that it's one rate, per customer class. So it's actually probably a lot simpler than it might seem when you get into, if you don't get into the details of the CIA, which isn't totally necessary.
Okay.
Although we all like details.
Some people like details.
Some people like details, yeah. Just.
But that's when you move on.
Yep. Actually, that was the only item that I was going to present on today, although I will make one note, which is there's a new CCA rulemaking that really comes out of SB 790. And so we're going to be developing a response on that. We're actually going to be working with a coalition of folks, not just us and the city and county of San Francisco, which is probably the entity closest to launching the next CCA in California, but also a variety of cities and towns that are interested in launching CCA programs. And so this coalition was pulled together by Lean, so Sean Marshall is here, and so that it's been a good conversation with them, and also just to have the conversation with other folks looking to be involved at the commission, and we think it's going to be a pretty productive opportunity. And that is.
You're going to touch on a few regulatory items? Or?
I can if you like. I was going to leave it simple for the evening, but
Sure.
if
only if there's like some ones we actually need to know about.
This is the best part of the evening.
Okay. I feel very much on the spot. I thought that people wanted maybe like a little bit of a lighter. Let me see what my favorite item has been of the past.
Throw a dart at.
You have to blame here because David asked
Oh.
the question. So.
I'll touch on one that is Director Leone's favorite proceeding, actually. He thinks I'm joking, but it's not. It's been going on for a while. And this relates to a solar equity application that PG&E submitted. It relates to an investment in a solar production facility. So it would be an equity investment, like a stock investment. And what PG&E wants to do is use ratepayer money, distribution ratepayer money, to make an equity investment in a solar production facility. And we have opposed this from the very start because, first of all, we don't see it as an appropriate use of ratepayer funds. And to the extent that PG&E thinks that this is a good investment, they do have a parent company that could appropriately make this investment and not PG&E's ratepayers. When the proposed decision was released, it rejected, or rather delayed, any decision on this matter, so effectively rejecting the application for funds. It's a relatively small number, and by small, it's probably, if I remember right, it's about $30 million. But interestingly, an alternate proposed decision was released by President Peevy's office, which accepts the application in its entirety and would make this equity funding. And so we've opposed this from the start, and the decision's going to be, we've supplied comments on the proposed decision and the alternate proposed decision, and so this will be coming up on the commission agenda in the next month. So we'll be watching that closely. And we have also been involved, another item that has been of interest to us relates to another PG&E application regarding fees. So this relates to the fees that PG&E charges to direct access and CCA customers. So currently, for example, we pay 44 cents per customer per month for billing services. And so that is over and above, that's intended to represent the marginal cost to PG&E of providing those billing services to our customers, even though they're already providing billing services to their own customers. So our customers are paying for the general billing services, and over and above that, we pay additional charges for billing services for our customers as well. And so we have submitted a data request on that to determine to gain more clarity on those fees, the actual marginal cost of those fees, whether certain line items are even necessary. For example, there are still residual line items. For example, if a CCA elects to have the IOU run its opt-out process, there are still fees for that. And just other items where there could be duplication between certain line items on certain electric schedules, on one tariff schedule versus another tariff schedule. So we're going to be involved on that. And those, I think, are my favorite proceedings. But, so now I know that in the future, I'll continue to add all of the gruesome details, the gruesome details of the past month.
Hey, Beth, I have a question for you. I understand that apparently we object to the source of funds used for the equity investment by PG&E, but in a solar installation. But as a matter of policy, wouldn't we want to be encouraging PG&E or anybody, if they want to invest in a renewable energy thing, why isn't that a good thing? And then we try to figure out how to cooperate with it.
Yeah, I mean, we absolutely support folks investing in renewable energy in California, and we are very strongly supportive of all those endeavors. But when you're taking a look at the appropriate involvement of a utility that's supposed to be buying electricity, delivering electricity to its customers, part of that function is not private equity, part of that function is not investment banking, and there are a lot of resources out there, other funds that could be used for these types of investments. And the issue really is when the commission is making these approvals, the commission has to authorize these types of funds, but the commission isn't a bunch of investment bankers, and it isn't a bunch of venture capitalists, and it isn't, bankers of the like. And so when they're trying to make determinations about, they might not even know to ask a question about maybe capital calls. Is somebody going to be able to make a capital call and request additional money based on this investment? Is the equity really protected from future investments? Is it, is this investment going to be diluted in some way? And so there's a lot of factors that go into that. And the business of the commission is to look, for example, is to look at the reasonableness of power supply contracts and approve those, or look at what improvements need to be made in the transmission grid and approve those, but not necessarily to make equity investments. And it's not, it's a matter of sort of gambling with ratepayer funds when you have, and an additional point is just you have a parent company that is fully capable of making this investment. And so if this is that great of an investment, why isn't the parent company simply making the investment on its own? And so when you're trying to parse through what's the appropriate entity for making that investment, it just doesn't seem like the appropriate venue. And it also could lead to additional, you have a $30 million request now, but is the next request going to be substantially larger, and where do you draw the line?
How are they going to pay for their $5 billion pipeline fix-up?
Thankfully, I don't follow the gas. So.
Anything else? Okay, we're adjourned.
Yeah, that's a